I remember walking in the first time into Hope Chapel, Hermosa Beach. The music was cranking. I'd never heard anything like that before in my life. There were kids standing along the back wall with towels wrapped around them, dripping wet, eating Big Macs. I remember thinking, can you do this? The small groups are called mini churches at Hope Chapel, and Bill was leading one of them.
I remember being really nervous walking in, and Dave and Marilyn Moore were the host home.
God did something really special with that mini church because it was really a group of leaders. So you have this group that became this great family that God just so happened to put together this great mix of people who really could go and start a church.
And I remember Alice Remedios telling us, she said, because Hope planted churches all the time. And Alice said, don't you think that, to Bill, don't you think you could plant a church? And he's like, no, I can't do that. Well, one thing led to another, and God just really placed on our hearts, this is what we're supposed to do.
The earliest memories I can remember is when he was pastor of Hope Redondo in California. And I remember starting out and it just being such a small church, and they moved into a building and decided to renovate this building. And I remember being around during the construction and so much prayer taking place. And I know for them that was such a huge move coming from Hope Hermosa and starting this church just down the road.
The church growth was going very, very well. Everyone was gelling. It was really a great feeling place.
We had been part of a church plant with Bill and Marcia that started Hope Chapel Redondo, and so we had been attending there, and Bill had this call to come to North Carolina. Okay.
And after about 4 years, we just felt the tug that we were supposed to do something else, and somebody had told us about the research park. We had never been to North Carolina, neither one of us.
Bill called me one day and said, I think God's calling me somewhere else. I think I'm supposed to move. And I said, really? Okay, so where? I think I'm going to North Carolina. And I said, really? Okay, cool. Have a great life.
Bill calls, and he mentioned something about his move to North Carolina, and I was stunned. Mike hadn't even mentioned it to me, and so I'm on the phone
Why would
sobbing.
I tell her? We weren't going
And
or anything.
it was just so matter of fact that, you know, it didn't even enter his mind that it would be something we would pray about.
Alice says, so what do you think about that? And I said, what do you mean, what do you think about that? She goes, well, do you think maybe we're supposed to go? I said, no.
You know, Bill had announced this, and it seemed as though that was something that other people did. It wasn't something that we did. It was, we were very comfortable. I had a great job at the time. You had a great job at the time. We had a great little house in a great little section of town on the west side of LA, blocks off the beach. I mean, there was zero incentive for us to move.
I had my business. I was 9 years, give or take, into Dean Witter at the time. Business was growing well. Church was doing well. We had all our family was in California. So my analytical brain says, this is not my call. This is not something that God's called me to do, even though I never asked the question. But of course we're not going. So it wasn't really a consideration for me. Scott and I just kept talking about this over and over and over again, virtually ad nauseum, and we weren't getting any better at the discussion. It just kept really reliving the same issues over and over again.
And each of us flew out here. Mike and I flew out.
And I swear I was hoping that there would be a burning bush when I got off the plane. You know, some lightning bolt that would strike me that said, this is what God wants you to do. And it didn't happen. And as we think back on it now, I think we both recognize that God kept that going. That was something that, if it truly was not something that was going to happen, this conversation just wouldn't keep coming up the way that it did. And it always came up in the terms of, why would we, why wouldn't we? What's good about it, what's not good about it. And I think we learned a lot in that process, that when you try to figure out God's will via pros and cons, it doesn't work very well.
Mike and I had gone to a men's retreat, and Charlie, the associate pastor at the time, had taught on Numbers 13. And Numbers 13 is where Moses sends representatives of the 12 tribes in to check out the land of Canaan. And they, what they see is a land of milk and honey. They see powerful people, and they see fortified cities. And they come back and they report the same. And 10 of the 12 said, these people are too powerful and the cities are too fortified. And Joshua and Caleb said, no, God promised us that land. And he will give us that land as long as we're not afraid of the people and as long as we do not rebel against God. And it was at that moment that all of a sudden some lights began to go off in my head. That while I had been praying for God to direct us where we could most help him, God was really telling us, I want you to go where not your glory, but my glory was going to shine the brightest.
His sermon proceeds to point for point for point outline exactly what Scott and I were talking about all the way up to the men's retreat, almost in order, you know. And his conclusion was that God is calling you, some of you, to go somewhere, and you have to stop being chickens and just get up and go do it. And I remember Scott was sitting behind me, I'm sitting here, and Scott leans forward and goes, well, it's not a burning bush, but it's really close. And he and I both knew. We both knew exactly what God had done in that moment. And I remember the drive back, because I remember thinking, now what? You know, here it is, I asked for God to tell me, now he told me.
It was at that moment that we said, wow, this is it. Because that week I went in to tender my resignation, and I wasn't going to have a job. I was just going to move without the job. And HP offered up a position in Cary with a move package. You found out you were pregnant, and all of a sudden the housing market, which was in a nosedive, we had received 2 offers within 20 days or 19 days on the house.
I knew that I was going to have to do something about it quickly. We all know how these mountaintop experiences can be, right? It's real easy, especially for me, to let the world kind of seep back in, think if that was really God speaking, because I knew it was, and I couldn't let myself be talked out of what I knew just happened. So on Monday, I told my manager I was leaving.
Yeah,
So I
this
got
was
back
the
on a
next day.
Sunday.
Yeah.
I told my manager I was leaving on Monday, and we put the house up for sale.
And we sold our house in, what, like 2 weeks?
I don't remember.
It
was pretty quick.
It
though.
was so fast. We were spinning.
We still hadn't told Bill and Marcia, so the way we told them was kind of neat. We had a dinner over at in Long Beach.
We invited them over for dinner. Scott and Libby came over.
And we had it all set up.
Yeah.
I made dinner, and we had the music set up to Going to Carolina in my mind with
James Taylor.
Alice went into the back room, and I can't remember who turned on the music, but they turned on Carolina in my mind, James Taylor, and she comes out with a North Carolina sweatshirt on.
And we were looking around going, what? And it was an incredible moment because they're telling us that they're coming with us. They're going to help plant the church.
So anyway, that's how we told him, and that was a fun
It
moment,
was.
you know, of letting him know that, and I think he was pretty stunned.
We were going to a Foursquare church with some good friends, David and Sheridan Martin, and they knew some of the families that were coming out here to start Hope Chapel. And it turned out the friend was Scott Snyder. To make a long story short, Scott talked a lot about how he and some other families were going to come to Cary, North Carolina and start a church. Not long after that, we got a call, or I did, from a guy named Bill. I didn't know who he was, but and he was asking if we were interested in coming out to Cary with them to start the church. It was like there was not even any question about it. It was like we just knew right out the box that we were going to move to Cary, North Carolina.
First of all, I was not asked if it was all right if we moved out to North Carolina, mainly because I was 2.5 at the time and had no say on whether or not we were moving out here.
We came out in a Volkswagen Vanagon, which was this giant blue square bus thing. And my parents turned it into such an amazing journey. It was not what it should have been, which was moving with 3 children under the age of 9 in the middle of July in this van for 7 days. It should have been treacherous, but it wasn't. It was an adventure for us. I remember every morning we would start out and my dad would pop into the cassette tape The Great Adventure by Stephen Curtis Chapman, which had just come out.
I remember just living here the first couple months, and it was just so different from what we had in California. I remember the first couple meetings that we had in the house with just Mike and Alice and Scott and Libby and some of the other people that had come with us. And then, I mean, from there it was Farmington Woods and seeing the church grow.
So yeah, we came out and first thing we did was meet all the families. And I can remember going to meetings in Bill and Marcia's living room, and planning for the church. So we bought into the vision real early.
We were neighbors of Mike and Alice Remedios, and also on our same street were Mark and Linda Binkley and their family. And we had been friends with the Binkleys for a number of years.
We went all over Cary looking for places to go and worship, and we visited several and discovered Hope Chapel and pretty quickly plugged in.
On a Sunday morning, we decided we would just open the Yellow Pages. Back then people opened the Yellow Pages. And we opened the Yellow Pages and theirs was the first ad in the church section. And the caption was, "When was the last time you had fun at church?" And the interesting thing was that the church was meeting in Farmington Woods Elementary School, which was directly across the street from the apartment complex where we were living.
There were about 30 people there. It was a little strange.
Almost as many musicians as there were attendees.
Yeah.
You could set out in a few minutes.
But we didn't have a better option for a church at the time.
Farmington Woods was kind of our initiation. We had all of our equipment that we had to cart in there. It was our trial of how we were going to do church, and we had to develop all our systems on how that setup would happen, what the morning would look like.
What really got me, even that first Sunday, was Bill's teaching. And he just seemed to just teach the Bible in a way that I'd never heard it taught before. And that really stuck with me. Even though the culture of the church was very strange for me, I really loved the teaching and the worship grew on me.
Clearly one of the biggest wins for us at Hope Chapel, and especially for those who were initially involved in the church plant, was being able to successfully transition the leadership and the guidance of this church to people who are here.
I think that gives you probably the best perspective of at least how we became involved, and it should also give you some pretty good background at the beginning of what you know now to be Hope Chapel Apex.